This is Dom Bettinelli, the CEO of SQPN, with a brief but very important message. For more than a decade, SQPN has produced the Catholic faith and pop culture podcasts that you love. We're a nonprofit organization, so it's only your generosity that lets us carry out our mission. We haven't run a fundraiser in 2 years, and that's why we need to ask for your help right now. Please make a pledge of whatever amount you can afford to help us continue providing your favorite podcasts, as well as exciting new ones we have planned. To make your pledge and find out about the free thank you gifts we'd like to send you, visit sqpn.com/give. That's sqpn.com/give. Thank you for your generosity. May we hear from you today? You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode number 97.
Don't be scared. All of this is new to you and new can be scary. When people need help and never refuse. There's this moment when you're sure you're about to die, and then you're born. I know exactly who I am. I'm the Doctor. Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who. And today we're discussing arachnids in the UK. Joining
a little arachnophobia there, Dom?
Yeah, I'll tell you a little more about that in a few minutes. Joining me today on the panel are Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going, Dom?
And Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
So before we begin, as I always want to remind folks, remember to like The Secrets of Doctor Who on Facebook, on our Facebook page, to retweet and share the podcast episodes as you see them show up on social media. Leave us comments. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't yet in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or YouTube. And if you subscribe on YouTube, make sure you hit the bell to get notifications that when a new episode drops, and to share the podcast with your friends to help us grow our community and reach more listeners. We really do appreciate it. And especially if you can, if you get a little extra time, to go into one of the podcast directories and leave us a review. A nice 5-star review is really helpful. It helps us get into the algorithm, and then the podcast directories show the podcast to more folks, and that's what we're all about. We're trying to reach people and reach out to people and have a fun conversation about Doctor Who. And I also want to remind you, as we did last week, we mentioned, or a couple weeks ago, we mentioned the SQPN giving campaign. We are a nonprofit organization that depends entirely on the donations of people like you to continue to offer all of our podcasts, not just Secrets of Doctor Who. Creating all these podcasts is a full-time job for me. I do this for a living, and I need to, keep my kids fed and clothed and a roof over their heads. And so we rely on good people like you who want to help us in our mission of exploring the intersection of faith and pop culture through podcasts like Secrets of Doctor Who. If you go to sqpn.com/give, you will see a button there to go to Patreon to become a patron of the show. We have some nice gifts for you, especially a couple of Doctor Who related ones if you give at certain giving levels. So if you could just check that out, go to sqpn.com/give, and we'd greatly appreciate it. So, creepy spiders. I do not like spiders, guys. In fact, I had a friend to send me a message on Facebook, and she said, I haven't watched it yet. On a scale of 1 to I have to close my eyes and only listen to the episode, how bad is it? And I said, that meme of the little girl standing in front of the burning house, and it says, I saw spiders, so I burned my house down? Yeah, that.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
I can imagine worse spider horror, but it is pretty creepy in this one. This was
creepy. This was a very creepy episode, and which was kind of, in some ways, was kind of fun because this is kind of getting back to the classic monster episodes of Doctor Who.
Doctor Who has a couple of different kinds of episodes, and one of them is the monster, the scary monster
hide
sort
behind
of thing.
The couch monster.
I will say that the CGI of the spiders was pretty impressive in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I think they looked really realistic. They did a good job on them.
Yeah. They did. I was going to say, but there was a movie from the 90s, I think, or it might have been the 80s, called Arachnophobia, which as an arachnophobic, I watched it, which I'm not sure why. I'm going to say it was peer pressure.
It's cathartic.
Yeah. I mean, it actually was a pretty good movie, but that one was worse than this one. But this was, there were times when I did have to kind of turn away from the screen because I just didn't want to see all the creepy legs.
Interesting. I guess I may be on the other end of the spectrum when it comes to. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of spiders. I mean, they're fine, but I've actually seen quite a number of spider movies. The 1950s B movie classic, The Giant Spider, or Earth versus the Spider.
Yeah.
The 1970s William Shatner vehicle, the Giant Spider Invasion, Tarantula, all those things. I haven't been unduly creeped out by them.
It's not so much spiders. Like in fact, if I have a spider in the house and if it's up in the corner, like a daddy long legs or something, and it's catching flies or mosquitoes or whatnot, I'm a live and let live kind of guy. It's when they get more than an inch or so big and hairy.
when you see the ones from Australia where they're covered like half a wall.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. It was, did this episode get filmed in Australia? Because like I saw some pictures online actually over this weekend from Australia of like a whole park covered in cobwebs. I mean, Australia, I love you folks, but I don't know if I'm ever going to visit because the whole country seems designed to kill you with your wildlife. And that's just kind of not my thing. But
it's interesting. We had a comment the other day on Facebook from Bennett Gillespie, one of our British friends, who noted something similar about the United States. I mean, he recounted a story where one day I came out of work and found a baby rattler, and my first thought was there are women in this building who are wearing sandals, and so stomp, I took care of it. And then my second thought was, hey, my chiropractor was right. I am left-footed.
and now you know why people wear cowboy boots in the Southwest too. That's the other thing.
And here too.
Yes. All right. So let's get into the show itself. We have a big guest star. That's actually one of the things that they kind of promoted before the season began was, in one of the episodes, we have this big American star, Chris Noth, who has been in Law & Order. I think it was Law & Order, right?
Yes.
One of the 25 seasons of Law & Order he was in.
Yeah.
Several of them, in fact. And then he was also in Sex and the City, the HBO series, which I never saw, but apparently he was big in that.
I haven't seen either of those, so I didn't know who he was.
I just know that he was Mr. Big in the Law and Order, or not the Sex and the City.
Yeah.
Although he's not the only Law and Order alumni in this.
Oh, really? Who else?
Bradley Walsh Graham.
Yeah.
Was on Law and Order UK.
Oh, right. I forgot that there.
It was only for like 4 or 5 years. It didn't have anywhere near the success the US versions have had.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was in that as well. So there are 2 Law and Order alumni in this episode.
Interesting. That must have been fun for them to to connect on that.
Exactly.
So let's kind of talk about the character that he played right up front.
We have some stuff we want to get out of the way here.
Yeah, Jack Robertson. So he is very clearly a Donald Trump analog, and we don't want to talk politics on this podcast or any of our podcasts in general.
But when the show introduces politics, we kind of got to comment on it.
Yeah, and so. Robertson is very clearly, he's a businessman who owns a hotel chains, who has political aspirations to presidency.
Who likes to say you're fired.
Right. Who fires people to drop a hat. And so very clearly supposed to be a Trump analog. Although within the show, they say, oh, he hates Trump. And that's sort of the.
Yeah. And I wanted to give them points for that. Because it's a little more creative than just making him just a Trump cipher. He's just Trump with another name. The twist that he actually hates Trump and wants to win the American presidency from Trump is creative. I like that. Yeah. That's good. But the thing is, they don't tell us that until 30 minutes into the episode. Yeah. So we're most of the way through before they get any kind of creative with this guy. For the first most of the episode, we're left thinking, oh, this is just meant to be Donald Trump with the name filed off.
Right.
He's clearly there. Yeah, and he's clearly there to be mocked. He's presented initially as an extremely unsympathetic character. Over the course of time, I also want to give him props because they do let him articulate a viewpoint, and it's not entirely unreasonable. Things that he says just I mean, you can see he's not a purely evil man. He's trying to do good, however flawed he is, on some level. And also they give him some funny lines, and that's good too. So I want to give him props for the creativity, for letting him articulate a reasonable viewpoint at times, for giving him some good lines. All of those things are good. Fundamentally, though, he's still there as a Donald Trump satire. And I have to ask myself, if I was a BBC producer, what do I care more about? Building audience, knowing that the show needs audience to survive, or, signaling my political views? And I think I would make different choices, because it's not necessary to do this and risk alienating a good chunk of your potential audience.
Right. I agree. I mean, the fact is, and you mentioned this earlier when we were having a discussion before the recording, Jimmy, which is since 2005, the producers of Doctor Who, all three sets now, have alternately mocked American presidents or fawned over them. So they mocked George W. Bush, they fawned over Barack Obama, and now we have this mocking on some degree. I mean, it's very clearly
it's mocking.
It's
more mocking than what they did with George W. Bush. That was just a single line,
right?
And this is putting him in the show,
right? And it's just I have said in other venues and other places, I just am tired of everything being politics, because politics have become so angry and divisive, and you can't have a conversation about it without people getting mad. And I just want to watch Doctor Who. I just want to have a fun adventure without politics.
And that's my concern. And that's my concern, because if I'm sorry, when I sit down and watch Doctor Who, I want to enjoy myself. I want to have fun. I want to, laugh and be spooked out and scared and all this good stuff and be amazed. And right now, about the only way I can do that is go watch old Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Right. If we're going to keep this up.
And there was politics in Classic Who, but it was much more subtle, at least most of the time.
Right.
The criticisms that some people have made that it's just getting unrelenting on this show seem to have some foundation to them. I mean, it's every episode this season so far, there has been some kind of social political injection into the story.
And, and as I'm going to say this, as an American, the fact that the two stories next to each other brings concern, just because of how Americans are portrayed. And now the Rosa one, you can't prevent that. I mean, we argued about that one last week, but this one in particular,
you could modify it.
They could have modified it or moved it to a different point in the season, so it didn't look like it's just like one right after the other.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and even in Rosa, as I said, there were a lot of people, including in the South, who hated racism, and we didn't get any representation for those folks. Also, and that also, I think, played negatively, had a negative role in how this episode and how Rosa came off to the British audience, because I was reading the BBC website. Some people online pointed out, the positive reaction that Rosa episode had in England. Fine. Well, okay. So I went to read the BBC's own article about it, and they talk about how in 1950s America, black people and white people were separated by law. Really? In all of America? In all 50 states? So they're miseducating the British audience about this was a local problem. This was not a national thing. And by not having representation for Americans who hated racism, who weren't the victims of it, they miseducate the British public about the extent of racism in American culture at that time.
Right. I read a book last year about camping, the history of camping in America. It's only semi-related. There was a large section on segregation in national park campgrounds in the 30s and 40s, and it pointed out that there was not a done deal that things were segregated. There was a lot of pushback at the federal government level against people at lower levels in certain states against it. I mean, it was very clearly not, just America was racist and separate. And so, and I mean, this is sort of, I don't want to get off onto a discussion of racism in America, especially because that's not this episode. But it's clearly offering an unnuanced view of Americans, which is
right.
As an American viewer, I feel kind of attacked, whether or not I'm a Trump supporter or not. I just feel like, do we have to keep taking swipes at American culture, even the aspects you dislike, and even maybe aspects that I dislike? But do we have to keep taking swipes at it? I mean, I might have a crazy uncle, but I don't necessarily want people outside the family constantly harping on how crazy that uncle is. You know what I mean? So that's our viewpoint on that one.
So we have one other kind of political issue that's going to be inevitable in this episode, and that's the gun issue, because they bring it up again, and the Doctor has a really anti-gun perspective, and in New Who, that's not unusual. Now, it's been pointed out the Doctor has not had a problem with guns in the past and has used guns in the past. Yep. I don't mind them having the Doctor take an anti-gun position, because people change their opinions over the course of time. Certainly, if you've lived for 2,000 years, you may find yourself on different sides of various issues. Well, so
time war and all that too, I mean,
yeah. So I don't mind that in principle, but it gets taken to kind of an irrational extreme in this episode, because we're talking about spiders, and they don't do, these are not intelligent spiders. They're not the Arachnids, thank God. I'm really glad they're not the Arachnids. I hated the Arachnids.
That was Planet of the Spiders. The third.
No. The Arachnids are New Who with the Christmas Star episode.
Oh, right.
So,
yes.
With the woman
from the Dark Ages or whatever they call that.
Yeah. And I thought that was and if I would have rather had the great one from Planet of the Spiders back, but yeah. But these spiders are just normal spiders. They're just big. And it seems like the only reason the Doctor cares about them is because they're big, which would make it a clear case of sizeism. They're just normal spiders. And if you have a spider infestation, you call pest control and deal with it.
Exactly.
I found myself thinking, what do the producers of Doctor Who have against the UK pest control industry?
Yeah.
Because
I feel like that the whole spider plot line, as far as that's concerned, fell flat. Because again, this wasn't, the Doctor was upset that these spiders might be killed, but they're ordinary plain spiders that just happen to live long enough to get to monstrous sizes.
Right.
Yeah, but they're still ordinary plain spiders.
And so then we have the two, solutions that the episode gives us at the end, spoiler warning, to the spider problem. First, they lure all the smaller spiders into the panic room where they're going to lock them in there and starve or suffocate them to death. And those things, and they actually don't bring suffocation up. It's just starvation at that point, because they've got food supplies in there. Presumably they'll eat through those. Well, these things are carnivorous predators. And after they finish the food supplies and they continue to get hungry, they're going to turn on each other. And this is not going to be a humane death. The humane death is called pest control and just gas them rather than let them eat each other alive.
Right.
And then we have the big mama spider that is suffocating. And so point for that. There are real problems with scaling up creatures that are not designed to be that big. The classic 50-foot praying mantis would not work, and neither would a spider that big. So the fact that giant spider is suffocating, fine, good, props for that. We can even feel sorry for the spider that it's suffocating. That's a horrible death. And precisely because it's a horrible death, what's his name? Robertson?
Robertson,
Robertson does is entirely reasonable. Now, in reality, shooting a spider with a gun a spider of that size with a gun is not going to kill it unless you hit the brain just dead on.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they don't have vulnerable areas the same way we do. But suppose he's a monster good shot. He hits the brain. He kills it. It is indeed a mercy killing. That's exactly what you'd want to do to a non-intelligent life form that is suffering a horrendous death, like suffocation. Right. Haven't the producers of the show ever seen Old Yeller? I mean, exactly. This is exactly what you do to a suffering animal.
Right. If you have a deer on your lawn that is been hit by a car and is broken leg and is suffering, you don't, you call animal control, they come out and they put it out of its misery. I mean, that's literally what it's called, putting it out of its misery.
I was even just thinking a pet, a dog. Someone has a dog that is, 12, 13 years old and is suffering, and it's having, like my parents had this situation with their black lab where she just couldn't get around anymore. Right. And they could leave her to suffer, or they could have her humanely put to sleep.
Yeah. Right. And in some places, you just take care of this yourself out in the country. And if you're in the city, maybe you take it to the vet and have it put down. But surely people in England put their animals down. I've even heard that referred to on British television shows. So this is no different than that.
Right. So this isn't so much a British versus American approach to guns, so much as it is just sort of a weird super pacifism fetish and almost a PETA level concern for a creature that which doesn't take into account that maybe this is what's best for that creature. I think forgetting the distinction between sentient people and a bug, which is what a big spider is. I'm sorry, it's a big scary killer spider. Shoot it.
Yeah, exactly.
I have no problem with that.
One
thing that was kind of interesting,
suffocating.
Right.
Going back to the issue of the suffocating the spiders, or the starving out the spiders in the panic room. Why did the genetic engineer who worked with spiders not point out that was a bad idea?
Well, right. So we could get into the story itself, because there's a couple things I want to say about that as we get back into it. Yeah. Right. We do need to talk about it, but we wanted to deal with the sort of the extreme anti-gun attitude of the doctor and the Trump analog up front. Get those out of the way. And move on to the rest of the story per se. Yeah. But because there are a couple things to call out on that, Father Corey.
So let's go to the beginning of the story where they're traveling through the vortex. Well, and
let's go even further back.
Okay, go ahead.
Because we have no teaser and no cold open. That I thought was an interesting choice, because they sometimes do, they sometimes don't. This one had no teaser, no cold open, went right to the credits. But the opening shot was the spider's eye view going through the hotel. Have you noticed that? Like the different shots from the low to the floor, going through the hotel, and then we end up in the ballroom with Robertson and.
I hadn't noticed that they were like ground level.
Yeah, and I thought super creepy because it's one of those things where they don't reveal the spider until well into the episode. You don't see them until well in. It's a classic.
That's normal. Doctor Who has lots of monster POV shots before the monster reveal.
Yes, usually with like green or red around the edge of the screen, and
right. So I'm sorry, Jimmy. I kind of preempted your going through the vortex.
So they're flying through the vortex, and they have new vortex special effects. Yeah. And I thought that was interesting. I mean, the vortex has been depicted a number of ways on the show, and, I kind of like this one. I've also mentioned I like the new opening credits.
Yes, they are.
Well, I like, too, they show the vortex where there's actually almost like a chamber where there's multiple passages to go through. Yeah. Right. It's not just a straight corridor. I was kind of disappointed, though. They brought back the bouncy ride. They finally got that smoothed out, and now it's bouncing around space again.
She actually makes she has a line on that where she says, "I'm still getting used to the new controls and etc." So I think we can anticipate that kind of smoothing out, because otherwise it's really tedious for the production to do that every time.
Yeah, it's also they're as Chibnall has indicated he wants to hark back to the beginnings of Doctor Who, and that's real clear from the opening credits alone.
Yeah.
But also they've introduced more of the classic themes. I mean, this is more of a classic monster episode.
Yep.
And we have the classic companion group, like this is Ian and Barbara and Susan, kind of.
Yep.
Again, and they do get back to Earth this time, but way sooner. But we also have more of the Doctor isn't fully in control of where the TARDIS goes,
right?
And so it's kind of brought back some of that unpredictability,
right? I did like as after they land right outside of Yaz's flat in Sheffield. There's sort of this awkward moment where they're leaving and she doesn't really want to go, and she wants them to ask her to stay. And you know, I kind of like this whole socially awkward phase of the Doctor, which is, it's sort of like Matt Smith's socially awkward Doctor, except not as extreme. Like Matt Smith, like most everything he did was over the top. She's kind of doing her own thing, but I've really come to like this Doctor. I really, I like her patter. I like her awkwardness. So that's I'm really happy with.
I like Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor. I think she's fine. I didn't like this moment where she's standing in the TARDIS door and being like really passive aggressive or something about, come on, just, you want to stay, you want to hang with them, just say so. I mean, and also I thought it was kind of at counter purposes to the way they've been billing the companions now, as these are her new best friends. And she even is talking about them from the first episode on as her friends. But she doesn't treat them like friends. If people are really your friends, you don't just, well, I guess that's it, and I'm going to be really sad here, and then I'm going to go. And that's not what you do with your friends.
I know a few socially awkward introverts where this is entirely how they treat their friends.
Well,
call it out to you, Teresa, my sister-in-law.
Oh, careful.
No, she knows it.
Edit that.
She knows. She knows. I mean, she's very clearly, she asks people to tell her when she's when she's being socially awkward. So and she'll love this actually scene when she watches it, because this is entirely true to life for her.
Well,
yeah,
we'll leave that to your family. Speaking of families, I did like the introduction of Yaz's family. Up to now, Yaz has kind of been along for the ride, but we didn't know anything about her. She didn't have a lot of character development. Now we finally get to see some of that. I liked that. I liked when we're in their apartment and the Doctor is trying to make small talk and it's not working, and she's just kind of rambling. And she actually sounds a good bit like on the dialogue level. I mean, it's obviously Jodie Whittaker's inflections, but on the dialogue level, I could imagine that coming out of Eleven's mouth or even 10's
absolutely
mouth.
Yeah, that was my thought. Yeah
you know,
I'd be brilliant in a flat.
Yes, a couch. I could sit on a couch.
Purple couch and sit on it. Yeah.
And then she asks, is that weird? Yes, you're being weird right now. Again, more.
And by the way, actually a point where he talks about, or she said, I've never had a flat. Well, yeah, you did.
Yeah.
You roomed
right
with the lodger.
His roommate. Yeah.
Oh, right. That's right.
Yeah.
The one thing that sort of cliche was the younger sister on the make. We've seen that before. You know, the younger sister who is like, oh, are you dating him? Oh, then I'm going to go after him. Like this sort of like, I don't know. It just seemed kind of cliched, like a trope. I don't know how often.
There were a lot of cliches in this family, though.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
the kind of weird
the dad who thought he could cook, but he really couldn't, and the mom who was being nosy about the relationship and everything, and you know that's a lot of cliches there.
Yeah.
Well, what it did do, though, effectively with all three of the family members is give Yaz incentive to travel with the Doctor.
Yes,
right? Because all three of it gives credibility to her line at the end that she loves her family, but they drive her crazy.
Right.
Yeah, I mean they weren't unsympathetic.
Right.
They were just cliched.
They were certainly less objectionable than, say, Martha Jones's family. who were really
Bill's
bad. Or Bill's family, right? Or lack thereof in some cases. So now Graham, meanwhile, has this. This is that payoff we were talking about. Where's Graham's grief? Well, here it is, right in front of us. He projects and imagines conversations with Grace, and you really see him in pain here.
Mm-hmm. He's not weeping, but it's clear he's sad. He's processing all of this. I loved getting to see him go home, and I loved getting, I liked the fact that Ryan said, "You want me to come with?" And he says, "No, I'd rather do this alone." That is authentic.
Yeah.
After my wife died, there were times I could not wait to be alone. Just to deal with the situation. And when we get the visions of Grace, it's like I wanted to cheer. That was awesome. I was so happy for Graham to have those, even though they're imaginary, to have those visions of Grace as ways of bringing her into the present. And then the smelling the coats thing.
Oh, yeah.
That's people's odors do linger, and you want to hang on to that. Smell is a very powerful emotion. That was very realistic too. All of that I thought was very well done.
Well, and then the line at the end, the very end, where he talks about how grief takes time,
right.
And this helps. Yeah.
I don't want to sit around my house waiting for the grief to go away. I want to be out there doing that. And when that sort of explains why, when they were out there, he wasn't, in his grief wasn't showing on his face all the time, because he had stuff to keep him busy. So they didn't have to.
Yeah,
exactly.
And there should be, psychologically, realistically, there should be some heavy bounces for him in the future, because what happens is when you experience a huge tragedy like this, you can't face the full weight of it all at once. You have to distract yourself and let yourself feel it in little bits so that it's controllable, so that it doesn't just overwhelm you. Yeah. And then as you get a little more distance, you can allow yourself to feel more of it and deal with it on a more long-term basis.
Right. So they meanwhile just happened to be a couple doors down from Yaz's family is this neighbor who happens to work in the lab where the spiders originate, as we come to find out, who is dead. Just clearly, let's get to that point, because a spider got into her apartment and killed her, and so this is our first glimpse of one of the big spiders, and it's the doctor has to figure out how to deal with it. I like this idea of like the garlic and the vinegar, that I'm not sure that whether that's actually true or not. Maybe it is. It probably is. But I'm going to file it away
like that.
Yeah. And at the later on the end, it's was it tea tree oil and peppermint oil?
Peppermint.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are a bunch of home recipes like that for dealing with ants and spiders and stuff. And some of them actually may work.
Well, there's we'll talk about. I'll say something controversial. Oh, look, an actual use for essential oils. But so then we follow this scientist who is the friend of the woman who died, who works in the lab, who's actually making these spiders, to her lab, where immediately she says something about messing with the enzymes of spiders to make them live longer and grow bigger. I'm like, ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
Now we have our origin.
I thought it was interesting that they actually presented her as a protagonist.
Right. Sympathetic.
She was a sympathetic character that, which, surprised me only because of the whole uproar with genetic modified organisms, GMO food. And, you would think that those who are doing this genetic engineering, which is what GMO is, would be presented on a negative light. But in this case, she's a very positively presented figure.
Yeah, a little oddly so, given the way the shows normally present people in her line of work. And what they then do sort of is shift the badness off onto the Trump analog, because you can see as soon as she says we contract with a very reputable disposal firm. Well, what multinational conglomerate in this episode is going to own that?
Exactly.
But then they kind of pull it back a little bit, even though they're trying to make her sympathetic and Robertson unsympathetic. They pull it back a little bit, where she's like at one point blaming Robertson for the spiders, and it's like, hey, those weren't my spider carcasses. And it really is a comedy of errors, if you want to put it that way, that resulted in the spiders due to errors on both sides. Right. Their lab made a mistake in throwing out spiders, or at least a spider that was not dead, and his contractors made a mistake in how they processed this refuse. And so I thought that was not kind of nice conceptually, even though they're making him more unsympathetic. I thought it was nice conceptually that the truth really here is in the middle, and they pointed out.
I felt like it was, at least for me, that it was subtle that they put any blame on her. I mean, it was one line, they threw it out there and walked away from it.
Right.
There was,
most of the blame was squarely on Robertson, not on her. That's for sure. I did like the fact that we had a nice throwback to the 80s, like movies from the 80s. Toxic waste. Remember that? Toxic waste being the cause of mutations to create bad creatures? That's like 60s, 70s, 80s.
Genetic engineering plus toxic waste equals giant killer spiders. That sounds like a 1980s, 1970s horror movie.
I mean, just throw in some radioactivity and we've got the whole thing.
That would take it back to the 50s.
Exactly. So we have this moment where Robertson encounters the giant spider coming through the hot tub in this bathroom. As soon as he heard the noise in the tub, I had this flashback from about a month ago. We were on a family vacation to Kentucky, and we were in this cottage that we rented, and I hear
a giant spider came through your bathtub, and
I had a scream from the bathroom. Yes, there was a scream from the bathroom. And I look in there, and there was it may not have been 10 feet across, but it sure seemed like it at the time. It was a really big Kentucky spider in that tub, and I had to be the one to kill it. And boy, did I give it what for! But as soon as he starts heading toward the tub, I'm like, "Get out! Get out! Don't go toward the tub!"
By the way, I thought I liked his line afterwards, where the doctor, waves the psychic paper in his face and says, "I'm a disaster specialist" or whatever,
right?
And I need you to tell me in one line what just happened. And he does. A giant spider just smashed through my bathtub and killed my bodyguard, Kevin. And she gives him props for that. It's like, okay, good. That's what I needed. I thought that the horror in the bathroom, now it's despicable the way he locks Kevin in the bathroom. And
right.
That's meant to make him unsympathetic. It initially looks like he's trying to kill Kevin, but they pull that back with dialogue to where he didn't think Kevin was going to die. It's like he was just getting away from the spider and expected Kevin to deal with it. Then, of course, Kevin is not able to. And having Kevin wrapped in the silk and being drugged down the drain, the now enlarged drain, it was screaming and conscious. That was very effective.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That was extremely creepy.
Brr. No kidding. So I thought there was a funny line that Robertson has when they try to get out of the hotel and the spiders have put these their webs across the door so they can't get out, and Robertson is still in denial. He says spiders can't weave webs like that, and I'm like, spiders can't grow to 10 feet across either.
Yeah, exactly. Saw one.
Yeah, exactly.
I wish they had tested those webs at the door, because they didn't. They just walked away from them. They should have tested them, and they should have found that they're super strong, just like they had been saying earlier in the episode.
Right. They can stop a airliner flying through the air or whatever.
By the way, I also wanted to mention with the bathroom scene, I think there's a callback deliberately to a line from Doctor Who history. John Pertwee is famous for having said that it's not the monsters you encounter in outer space that are the scariest. It's the Yeti in your loo. And here we have a giant fuzzy spider like a Yeti in your loo. And it is indeed very scary.
Speaking of John Pertwee, then, I was kind of disappointed we didn't get any callback to the Planet of the Spiders episode, Pertwee's last, his regeneration episode, the Third Doctor. Which,
that would have been nice.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, someone was saying it online that when Planet of the Spiders was originally filmed, they had to kind of edit it to make it less scary for use of the time. I think it was our friend Bennett, and it's like, it would have been nice to kind of have that callback, that just some reference to it. I don't know. I just, I now that I've become an aficionado of the entirety of Doctor Who canon, there's always these links that you kind of wish they would make.
Well, it is interesting because Chris Chibnall obviously wants to call back to Classic Who, but at the same time, he's trying to not call back to Classic Who.
Right.
You know, he's trying to do both. He's trying to do both at the same time. And I mean, so he obviously he has to make decisions as far as that goes. But
by the way, we mentioned it came up last week, but the title Arachnids in the UK. And so one of you mentioned that it was a reference to something else.
Well, it sounds like it's a reference to Anarchy in the UK, which was a song and maybe album by the British punk band the Sex Pistols.
Oh, right. Anarchy. I haven't. I was kind of looking for that, and I haven't seen any reference to it, but that's got to be it. I mean, if a listener has any more insight on that, where they think the title comes from,
they might not have done anything within the episode itself,
right?
But
sort of leaving that for the viewers to kind of figure, to get
exactly.
So, why did Graham and Ryan have to go back and get a bigger spider? Because wasn't that one big enough?
I know. It's they already know there's one that's capable of dragging a man down a bathtub hole. Right. I don't think this one they've got is capable of it. They should know there's a bigger one out there.
Okay. And then
that was just a plot hole. That was just to achieve companion separation.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
And get the little conversation between Graham and Ryan about Ryan's dad.
Yeah, which was nice.
Yeah, we did get a question. Go ahead.
Also, when they capture the first one in the crock pot or whatever that is, the soup pot or whatever,
it's a stock pot. But yes,
I love the reverse angle shot we get with all of those spiders coming across the ceiling. That was great.
Yeah,
love is not the word I would have used.
I had to laugh though when they caught it in that pot.
Yes,
and then slid the lid under. I actually had to do that about a week or so ago with a bat. I had a bat in my room, and I was able to smack it down and capture it. But I didn't have to use a soup pot. I could use a bucket and a plate.
Did you have bats in your belfry?
Oh, I've always got bats in my belfry. This time it was in my bedroom.
Okay. Unlike most people, being a priest, he's likely to actually have a belfry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So one of our listeners, Rick Angelini, asked on our Facebook page, why was Yaz's father bringing home garbage? Where did it come from? And that went fast, so it's I can see how you miss it. They do deal with it when they're standing on the edge of that toxic waste dump underneath the hotel, saying that's where the dad was getting, that it was bubbling up somehow.
It was showing up at their apartment building, and he brought it inside because he thought it was part of some conspiracy. He wanted to keep it as evidence of someone illegally dumping this stuff at their apartment building. Right. And apparently was coming up through whatever channel the spider that killed the neighbor did.
Yeah. And the Yaz's mom makes a remark. My husband is right about this conspiracy, and I hate when he's right about these things. How dare you make him right? Yeah. So
she got some good lines. At one point when they're heading into the restricted area under the hotel, and Robertson stops her. She says, "You're not the boss of me anymore."
That's right. He's not.
I also loved how the doctor keeps referring to her as Yaz's mom. Yeah, even though she's said her name several times in front of her. Yaz's mom, what do you think about this?
Well, it's so funny because it's like what you do when you're a kid and you have your friend's mom. Like you refer to them as, Billy's mom. What do you do? What do you think? Yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And one thing I do want to jump back to just really, really quickly, talk about that conversation between Graham and Ryan is I think they've pretty well made it clear that at some point this season we will meet Ryan's dad.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, right.
Because they talked about how the letter was how he wanted to get back into Ryan's life.
Right. There was a moment where Graham gives a letter to Ryan that the dad had left at the apartment or at the house. Right. And Ryan then said he did read it, and the dad was.
They showed him reading it in the kitchen there. It was kind of brief where it went into the kitchen. You can see him closing the letter and putting it back in his pocket.
Right. So, yes, very clearly we're going to see Ryan's dad at some point this season.
One thing I had in my notes of that's kind of in this part of the episode, it's a little earlier, but when the female assistant gets killed in the down below area, she drops her phone that she's apparently been filming with, and we get this shot of her phone laying on the ground, and it struck me that that's a really cool shot. You know, as she's being eaten off camera or whatever, not eaten, but injected with spider toxin and then, you know,
wrapped up,
trellised up.
Turned into Frodo.
Yeah. But as that's happening and we hear her crying out and we get the shot of this phone laying there, it's reminiscent of shots that you would have had in other movies and TV shows up to now where, like, you see the horror dimly reflected in a mirror or something.
Right.
And here we have a mobile phone playing that role. And I just thought that's a neat little technological advance on a previous visual trope in this kind of story.
They did show, like, there was several times where someone had their phone and it dropped and broke in the midst of an attack. Robertson had the same thing happen. And I was trying to figure out what they were trying to do with that. I mean, the fact is, I mean, she's filming this, but they never did anything with the footage of her. They didn't pick it up and say, look, we have evidence of your misdeeds, or
they didn't mention the phone at all after that.
Yeah. Sort of a little bit of Chekhov's gun going off.
The weirder one I thought was Robertson's phone, because they make a point of showing him setting it down, and then he goes, "Oh, my phone!" And when he's separated from it, and then Kevin grabs it, and then Kevin drops it on the floor, and it's like, what's the big deal with this phone? The other lady I can understand, you know, when she's taking footage, it's to document stuff for the future, whether they use it or not. There's a reason for that. But why are the filmmakers so interested in Robertson's phone?
I suppose it means that he's now isolated from his vast coterie of people, his multinational corporation.
You can't call in help or anything like that.
Right. He's. I mean, like, I would assume he's like a SWAT team of mercenaries at the beck and call or some silly thing that he's now reliant on the doctor, I suppose.
Okay.
One of the things, so we talked about the solution was to get all of the spiders into the panic room because they like rap music and or something. But how can they be sure they got all the spiders in there, like including the ones that were out hunting in the city?
Yeah, this is just move along. Just trust us. It worked.
Yes, it's a Doctor Who solution.
It's good old hand wavium. We're just going to kind of wave our hand, and these aren't the spiders you're looking for. Oh wait, that's a different and I kind of mentioned it briefly, but it's, why didn't this person who's supposedly a spider expert not say, if you lock them into this little room, they're just going to eat each other,
and the one who survives is going to be the biggest, nastiest one. Right,
and then he or she will
have grown die. Right, and then it will die, I suppose. I do not want to be the people sent in to clean that up.
Another bit of illogic here is after Robertson shoots the big spider, he says, "This is exactly what the world needs right now. This is what's going to get me into the White House." And I don't understand either one of those statements. How is this what the world needs?
The world needs,
that doesn't make sense. I mean, this spider invasion is self-limiting because they grow so big and then they suffocate.
The world needs a guy who's willing to go out and stomp the big spiders.
Well, they don't say it that way.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But I'm just kind of calling it
talking about it takes action. I don't know.
And then it's like, how is this going to get you into the White House? If anybody comes to know about this, it's just going to be another scandal of your company doing an inadequate job and almost causing a spider invasion that has killed several people and could have killed a lot more. And you had to get bailed out by these other people. And then you did a mercy killing on the giant spider that your toxic waste created. And that's going to put you in the White House.
Yeah, that didn't make much sense. By the way, I did like where he kept going, "Who are you people?"
Yeah.
And why is she in charge? Or who says she's in charge? We do. So, those were a couple of good moments. But yeah, you're right, Jimmy. That didn't make sense, that line.
And that's sort of his exit from the show, which is interesting for a couple of reasons, because under the normal laws of drama that would govern a television episode like this, given what they've established about Robertson, he should either be killed or humiliated by the end of the episode.
Or arrested or something along those lines.
Yeah. And neither of those happens. And that makes you wonder, is he going to be back in the future?
Well, and that's that's something that's kind of interesting. I've been noticing is there's less and less consequences for actions that the Doctor disapproves of.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's interesting that you don't have the. My initial thought was David Tennant's post-regeneration Christmas episode where, you know, I can ruin your life at 5 words.
Six,
you know, right. You know, and that whole thing of that where the Doctor was so all powerful that just whispering that, boy, doesn't she look tired?
Right.
Was enough to completely ruin Harriet's life, you know?
Right. That's true. Like I mean, it does mean the Doctor isn't bestride the world, dictating who rules and who doesn't, who survives and doesn't. I mean, it makes her smaller again, and that's good. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it makes me wonder. So we had in episode 1, we had Tim Shaw, who we have indications he's going to be back.
Yep.
In episode 2, Ghost Monument, there's no particular need for anybody to come back in the future, although they could.
Yeah.
In Rosa, we have future racist boy who could come back. In this episode, we have Robertson, who, given his lack of closure, since he was neither killed or humiliated in some way, he could come back to either be killed or humiliated. I'm wondering if we're building, I'm not only half seriously. I'm wondering if we're building to a season finale that's going to like have Tim Shaw, racist boy, and Robertson all in the same episode.
Well, I mean, I'd be surprised if Cresco can come back, since Ryan says I sent him as far back as I could send him. And he doesn't have the time displacement device anymore. So it could also be, since we're no longer, at least this season, using recurring villains of any from Classic Who or any season of Who prior to this, put it that way, that we're building a new pantheon of villains that maybe we're going to rely on. Could be, but I see your point. I mean, Robertson could certainly come back and do some more damage. So, you know, now that we've wrapped up things nicely in the usual amount of time that it takes to deal with these sorts of disasters, and the Doctor now has to be faced with this departure again, and then independently, each of the companions shows up at the TARDIS and kind of makes it clear that they'd like to go. And we talked earlier about Graham saying he wants to go because he's
grieving.
He's grieving and doesn't want to have to sit around by himself dealing with that. Because presumably, I think he said he was retired. He's a retired bus driver.
Yeah.
And then Ryan has a silly, you know, warehouse job that he doesn't want to do. But
I think that's rationalization. He really doesn't want to deal with his dad.
That's probably exactly part of it too. But now I'm thinking though, like, I know Yaz kind of wants to get away from her family, but wasn't she that go-getter rookie cop? Like, is she not throwing her career away?
Yeah. I could have, if I was a go-getter rookie cop, I could still say, let's take a couple of years right here and see the universe and come back before work tomorrow.
I suppose. I mean, that's, of course.
What I liked was having the companions be the one to ask this time instead of the Doctor. That was nice. I also thought it was nice that the Doctor warns them, and actually I think it was foreshadowing. The Doctor warns them up front, I can't guarantee you're going to be safe. And then she tells them, be sure, all of you. And I strongly suspect, now the comfortable way of thinking about that is she's remembering what happened to Bill, her immediate previous companion.
Right.
Because as far as she knows, Bill ended up as a Cyberman, and that was it. She doesn't know about the other stuff that happened with Bill, unless did she learn about that definitively in the Christmas special?
Twice.
Might have.
Maybe.
I think might have. I can't remember.
But even so, Bill's life path did not go the way that was planned.
Right.
And she did become a Cyberman.
Well, and Clara and Amy.
Yeah. Well, and
pretty bad track record there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, the comfortable way is to think she's just thinking back to previous companions. But I'm thinking, okay, we haven't had a real solid companion death that didn't get reeled back by Stephen Moffat in some time.
Right.
And I'm wondering if one of our three best new friends is not going to make it out of the season alive.
We could start taking bets on who we think it's going to be, but maybe not now.
Yeah.
Well, she does also say, and you won't come back the same as you are. And that's certainly true. We've seen companions are changed by their experiences. We saw that with Donna, for instance, Donna Noble.
But now they're Team TARDIS.
Right, in Team TARDIS.
I like the ambivalence. We can accept that.
Yeah. All right. We'll do
also,
that.
I thought the music in that scene was really nice. It was very emotionally effective.
Yes. So I think that's it for Arachnids in the UK, right? Was there anything else?
There was just one little thing when they were in the laboratory. All this exposition, what's going on. Ryan's in the back there at the projector doing shadow figures.
Yeah,
I missed that.
Was hilarious.
It's like, are you going to pay that off, or is that just a lanyap in the background?
I think that's what that
just
is.
something in the background to show that he's not paying attention to what's going on. He's just kind of off in his own little world, playing with the projector.
I wonder if that's just something the actor decided to throw in. They kept it in. That would be fun.
There were a number of interesting things that went by really fast like that on the visual level. Like at one point in that lab, the doctor is looking into one of the displays and it shows a big white spider on her face, a projection of a spider over her face for just a half a second.
So I do want to get to feedback. We have some feedback on our episode. We're discussing Rosa. Our friend Amy Flowers, who we've heard from a number of times, said that at first I was disappointed the villain was so flat and one note, Cresco. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense in the story, and Jimmy described it perfectly at the end. This is a real person in history whose real-life heroism should not have been cheapened by a sci-fi trope for entertainment. The writers did the best thing they could have done, have the villain try to sabotage history, and the Doctor and companions take steps to assure it takes place as it should. It worked for me, and I like the complexities the episode presented, even if it missed a few in its setting. And then she also said that she likes the fact that the Doctor doesn't magically know everything. He has to work out, the answers for herself. So,
I don't mind the Doctor being really smart. I do mind the Doctor being omniscient.
Right.
Exactly.
Yep. And then Michael Monley, also on our Facebook page, says, the problem I have with this episode is that since the villain can't kill her, why didn't he just send Rosa Parks into the future or past when he first met her?
Yeah, how about that one?
That's a little hole. Yeah, it's a little hole in the plot.
Just a little bit.
Chloe.
That's a pretty major one, actually.
Being sarcastic, yes.
Yeah. Chloe Stewart Monteith says, one of our British listeners, the Doctor Who episode was for UK Black History Month, so that's sort of why we have it when it is.
Okay.
And
Fair
she
enough.
says
that's February in America,
right? And she says we do learn about Rosa Parks for our GSCE's World History exams. However, Bennett Gillespie, who we one of our frequent regulars, says for him, so in his family, 2 50-year-olds, an 18-year-old, and a 13-year-old, none of us were taught about Rosa in school, and he admits it's not a representative sample by any measure. And of course, different schools can focus on different things, and
right.
So that's everyone has had that experience.
Yeah, Yaz even said it as if this was what my school did. Like she needed to tell other people about something that not every school does.
Of course,
right.
He said, I would suggest that the good attention the episode has drawn in the UK might be an indication the history wasn't well known, which is
and then he linked that BBC article, which was the one I mentioned earlier, where they're portraying it's like all of America was this way. And it's like, no, not all of America was this way. Don't think that.
Right.
Right.
Well,
exactly.
and I can understand why perhaps schools in Great Britain don't talk about Rosa Parks. I mean, to be the same thing as talking about how there was, I don't know if there was segregation per se, but there was definitely, people who were of African descent were treated poorly in the UK in the past, and they don't really talk about how that happened, how they overcame that. there.
They don't talk about how they overcame it, but they do talk about that both Ryan and Yaz have to deal with discrimination and prejudice against them. So yeah, they're focused on American.
An example would be here in American schools, they don't talk about Isaac Watts. Isaac Watts, the author of Amazing Grace, had been a slave trader, if I recall correctly, and then had a religious awakening. Yeah,
right.
That's right.
That was a movie actually about that. I forget what it was called, but there was a movie.
The movie called Amazing Grace.
Hey, maybe that would be why it's called Amazing Grace. That's me, Mr. Obvious. So that's our feedback for this week. As always, we love to hear from the listeners. So if you have some insight or reaction of any sort to what we have to say or discussion or to the episode itself, please let us know. What do you think of arachnids in the UK? Personally, I hate them, but what do you think? Maybe you love spiders. So let us know by visiting sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. Leave us some feedback on the episode link there, or send us an email to drwho@sqpn.com. You can find links to all our personal social media and our websites on our show notes on sqpn.com. I'll also put a link to that BBC News article so you can read that for yourself. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing, this word I'm going to have to figure out how to pronounce. Hopefully they'll mention it. Suranga Conundrum, which sounds like a Big Bang Theory episode title, but I think I said that before.
It does.
Until then, Jimmy Aiken, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Dom.
Father Corey Stika, thank you as well.
I'm glad to be here, and thank you, Dom.
And once again, I am Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, run now, ask questions later.
Right. This is going to be fun.
This is Dom Bettinelli again. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast and that you'll help us keep producing the podcast you love. Thank you for your generosity. To make your pledge and find out about the free thank you gifts we'd like to send you, visit sqpn.com/give. That's sqpn.com/give.